Welcome back to another episode of Distorted Opinions, where we talk all things music. This is part 2 of our segment with our guest, Marcus Washington. And in the last segment, we touched on the history of how we know Marcus, how he got into music, and we started to go a little bit into what Marcus has been doing for the last few years. Marcus, I know you said that you picked your sax up again about 5 years ago. I think we're definitely going to want to find out more about what you've been doing during that time and some of the bands you've been playing with. But welcome back. We're glad to have you, and looking forward to another awesome show. So Matt, I know you had some specific questions you wanted to chat with Marcus about. If you want to take the lead on this.
Indeed, I'll take the lead. Oh, here we go. All right, so Marcus, in our first segment, just like what Kayla said, you mentioned that you picked up your sax, your sax about 5 years ago. Right before the start point of year one, what made you just decide one day to go ahead and pick up the sax again?
So at that point, I was living in Worcester by myself, and I didn't know anybody out there. And I would just go to work, I'd go home, and I'm like, I need a hobby. What is something that I was good at, or that I had fun doing, that wasn't, too expensive? And I'm like, yeah, I used to play saxophone, and I ended up going on to Craigslist and found this group in Arlington. They would do, they had these little jazz combos and lessons, and you pay $20 every time you go. So I'd go out there once a week and do that. We'd have a concert like twice a year, and that's what got me back into playing.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Great. Was it, so I'm not sure if the rest of us have still our old instruments, but did you still have your old instrument from the high school days and just kind of dusted it off, or did you have to go and buy it? Oh, perfect. That's awesome.
And how much rust did you have when you picked it up? Because I've put my clarinet together, and just my muscle memory is still there on what all the notes do, but this is this is not functioning anymore.
It's funny is because it's funny that we all still have our instruments, because same exact thing, Ted. I not that long ago, I still have my trombone in my basement, and I want to say about 3 years ago, I was like, Marcus, kind of the exact same thing. Hey, you know what? Maybe I want to pick this thing up again, and blew into it, and obviously after cleaning it. Okay, just want to get for the record. Go ahead.
Get
3 years
spit out of there.
Blow the rats out. Yeah.
All the dried up spit.
All of a sudden, just a little solid thing comes flying out, and no.
Oh, geez.
Like a teal and a little bit of fuzz to it. No. But same as I think, Ted. I picked it up, and it was like, after 10 minutes, just my whole lips started becoming numb, and I'm like, oh, wow. So, as they say, age definitely catches up to you. But that's awesome, Marcus, that you just one day, you picked it up, and obviously 5 years later, you're playing in not one band, but multiple bands. So let's jump into that. So with this ensemble that you found on Craigslist, is this still a band that you still continue to play with?
No, it's not anymore. It was kind of like just a combo, like combos and lessons. And, obviously I had to drive I wasn't not too far, but I had to drive out to Arlington and pay money. And, sometimes I wish I was still doing that, but, I've had a lot of opportunities up here in the North Central Mass and Central Mass area. Let's see, shortly after I started doing the combos out there in Arlington, I noticed there were jazz jams out here in this area. I started attending those jazz jams and meeting a lot of people. And then there was also a blues jam around here. I started going to those, and met a lot of people through that. And, continuously networking, and, so many opportunities arose, whether to play as a special guest or to be a member of a certain band. And that's pretty much how all that happened.
That's awesome. So were these So were these all mostly through like what you said, networking, and were these just like open jam sessions, that like open mics type of scenario, and then
Yes.
one conversation led to another conversation, led to another conversation.
Exactly. And that still happens to this day. It still happens to this day. Opportunities come up like that.
That's
and
amazing.
Like everybody knows everybody, especially with social media now, and so many musicians just network on there and collaborate.
Right. Are you attached to any like groups on social media that our audience could look you up, or maybe even see some gigs that are coming down the line?
Oh yes, most definitely. Right now, I'm currently in, I believe, 4 bands. I think.
Four bands. He's in 4 bands.
Hey, the main group that I'm with right now is Tony Soul Project. Now Tony he's been singing and he's been a frontman since the early '60s, and he still does it. He still does, probably 200 plus gigs a year. And it used to be a collective of musicians, but now we're a core group. There's 5 of us. You've got bass guitar, drums, myself, and then Tony's the singer. And I sing some songs too, and a couple of the other guys sing some songs. But I'm pretty solid now, and that's my main group. And that's the one group that even during this, COVID-19 is, still playing, obviously practicing social distancing, but we play outside and record Facebook Live shows. So you can check out their page on Facebook, Tony Soul Project. Okay. And as far as some of the other bands, I'm not really sure where they stand right now with everything going on. Obviously, we did have some gigs booked, but everything was pretty much canceled until further notice with every other.
Right. So with your so obviously being not only a full-time mechanic, going into a HVAC career, being in 4 bands as a part-time gig, is this kind of like first come first serve? Like, do you let these bands know that, hey, I know that you have a gig on Saturday, but I'm already with this band right now? So how's that system work? Can you explain that type of system?
Oh, it can be a pain to manage, everything that comes up. I have to vigilantly put it in my calendar, whether it's a potential gig or it's confirmed booking. And it pretty much is first come, first serve. But I try to, obviously be fair about it and just try to you have to stay right on top of it, because there have been times where I've forgotten to put one in and had like a double booking, and yeah.
Was there any times where you actually had to do like 2 gigs in the same day?
Oh, yes. And I'll still do that. Like if it's summertime and I have an afternoon gig somewhere and then a night gig after, I'll go straight from one to the other sometimes.
Wow. And do those bands have a similar, do they have a similar set list, or, I mean, do any of those songs overlap between the groups, or are they, obviously focusing on different styles, or, and how does that?
Good question. Occasionally, depending on what bands I'm playing in, some of the songs are, some of the songs might be the same, like here or there. And one funny, interesting thing is, you could be playing the same song in one band, and then you play it in another band and just play it differently or in a different key, or it's kind of confusing sometimes. It's like, oh wait, I played this way that one. I don't do it like that with this one.
That's awesome.
But yeah, sometimes it does happen.
Now, do you guys play all based off of muscle memory, or you guys have like music in front of you?
We pretty much play off muscle memory.
Okay.
With a lot of the rock bands and soul bands, it's no one really has to read music, or no one really reads music. And the only time that we actually have music is when I'm doing, I'm playing with the jazz band, which I'd love to play more jazz, but it seems like that's what I play the least these days. But that's right. When there's always people reading, and everyone brings their real book.
Marcus, speaking of jazz, and kind of going back to what the first segment of our our interview process was, and obviously being in jazz band, what are there some, memories or maybe some songs that you remember from all four of our younger days?
Oh yeah.
Being in jazz band, like, is there a particular person or a particular, a song or, gig that you have fond memories of?
I really do have fond memories of the jazz band. I think that was the coolest thing ever. I think it was the coolest thing ever that I was able to join the jazz band when I was in middle school. And fond memories of Mr. Smith, rest his soul.
Yes,
and,
rest his soul.
And Mr. Smith was great. He taught me a lot, and he was an awesome guy. And he picked some really good songs for a jazz band.
Yep.
And I always have the fond memory of opening up with Satin Doll.
Oh,
One more once.
Yeah.
One more once. Yeah, there was Satin Doll. There was My Funny Valentine.
Yep.
Valentine.
Midnight in Paris, I think, was another one.
Midnight in Paris.
Or was it Moonlight in
April in
Paris? April in Paris. Oh, I'm mixing up two songs there.
And around midnight.
Hey, we got the jazz subject matter expert here on this episode.
That's right.
There was what else, guys? What else was there? There was Georgia on My Mind, and
I have to go fish through the music because I have all of it upstairs in the attic.
I do too.
I never got rid of it.
Oh, In the Mood. Marcus, did you play trombone on In the Mood?
I believe I did.
Okay, and then transitioned over to, like, actually, I'm wondering now. I'm thinking of it. Did you switch between instruments in jazz band at one point? Like,
I think I did.
I think there was a time where you played trombone, and then there was a time that you played sax.
Right.
But it was almost like.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember playing trombone and soprano sax on the same gig, like switching and just playing the soprano on certain songs. Yeah. But I think one year when some of the people in the jazz band graduated, like some of the saxophone players, and then I think I might have switched to saxophone.
Right. Okay. Now I remember. All right.
That was always so. Jazz band was one of those deals. As small as concert band and the marching band were. Jazz band was even smaller, and Marcus, I know Matt and Ted were a year ahead of us. Our senior year, if I recall, we only had maybe 10 people in the jazz band. I remember it being, I don't even think we had a drummer because we couldn't find somebody who wanted to play drums in the jazz band. So it was, at that point, Mr. Smith had kind of retired from running the jazz band, and Mr. Bell had taken over. And I vaguely remember Mr. Bell playing piano on a lot of songs. I played the bass. I think it was you. And then we had maybe 2 other sax players, and I think we might have had 1 or 2 trombones. I mean, it was a really small, really kind of bizarre lineup for a jazz band senior year. To not even have percussion in the jazz band was strange.
Kayla, actually, I think the year that Mr. Bell came was our senior year.
You guys had Mr. Bell, that's right. Yeah. But we did have a drummer, right?
Chris wasn't Chris.
Was it Chris Collette? Yeah.
Name drop.
That's right. So a lot of our jazz band people, I think, graduated with Matt and Ted with your class. So it was really, I don't even know right now. I think. So I'd be curious to know how big the band is, or was. Obviously, the kids aren't in school right now, but how big the band was currently, because I think they had both a middle school and a high school jazz band, which to me implies they had enough kids that were interested to be able to have 2 bands. Because I know, obviously, you guys started in the jazz band early on in middle school, and a large part of that was because they needed more people to play the instruments. So the fact that they can apparently have a jazz band in both middle and high school right now, I think says a lot about the fact that they seem to have gotten an increase in interest with kids playing instruments, particularly in the jazz band.
With our group, being on this episode, as well as, definitely another handful of, classmates that we have, we really were like the starting point to revamping the concert band, the jazz band, in the chorus. And I think that came with a lot of help with having an amazing, group of teachers during that time that really motivated us. Pretty much were like second parents to us. And, obviously that there's going to be a future episode for, dedication to those specific teachers. But, Kayla, I have to agree. I'd really be curious to see where the bands are moving forward, because I mean, we really kind of had almost like a silent movement. Like we were like this little group that just formed into like this storm of musicianship, camaraderie, and we were all on the same page to the point where we were even getting people that had no music interest to join some sort of element to the music, the performing arts in the school. And I remember this specifically because there were some like athletes that were joining the choir, and I'm going, who the hell are you? And then I'm going, okay, well, actually, all right.
It's a small school. I know exactly who you are, but welcome.
Welcome, yeah. Open on. Open on. But I think like all of us, us four, as well as, a group of those classmates really made a big impact during those years. And it'd be really curious to see, where it stands now, hopefully obviously bigger, again, we were just 7-8 people, and next thing you know, Ted, when we graduated, they were up to maybe about 30, 40.
I was going to say 30, 35, somewhere in there.
30, 40, yeah.
So not needing middle school assistants, just high school only, 30, 35. So definitely trending in the right direction. One thing that we were talking about, how small jazz band was, and how joining. One memory I have is going to Mr. Smith and saying, "Hey, can I join the jazz band?" And he says, "What instrument do you play?" I said, "Clarinet." And he says, "How do you want to? Let's have you play saxophone in jazz band." And I was like, "No, I don't play saxophone. I play the clarinet." And his response was, "There's no clarinets in jazz band." And I was like, all right, well, I'm not joining jazz band this year. And then left it at that. I was kind of ticked off because I wanted to participate, but, what is it, Benny Goodman? No, jazz clarinet, really? Okay, we'll revisit this. And then I think it must have been the year later, might have been freshman year in high school, is when I think he realized he needed people to fill in parts, and so then I was one of three, because I was Brian and was Keisha playing clarinet too?
Keisha played clarinet, yeah.
And then Alicia joined on clarinet later on.
Yes.
But we had 3, possibly 4 clarinets in jazz band by the time we graduated. So, but yeah, just being told no, I was like, well, I think he just really wanted another saxophone player. And I think that was his excuse for that in hindsight. But at the moment, that was very...
Mr. Smith had a... It's funny. Mr. Smith had almost like a... You have to approach him. He really wasn't a person that he would come toward you. But if you sparked interest in joining his group, he worked with you. He also had one hell of a personality. I remember playing, and for a while, I was nicknamed Spitz. Because he kept friggin' telling me, "Stop spitting in your trombone." And I go, "I'm not spitting in my trombone." And he goes, "Lift your valve." And all of a sudden, It grows, but a little fountain came out. Precisely. But he was always awesome. And I remember one day going, kind of going up to him when we all left like one night, because remember too, guys, jazz band was after school, right, and it was between 6 and 8.
Right.
And it was either in, Mrs. Cordio's music room, or it was in Mr. Tree's room.
Yep.
Or sometimes if we had, if we were getting ready for like the academic concert year, we would also practice in the auditorium. But I remember one night just being like, I'm getting really sick of being called Spitz. And he goes, well, then stop spitting. And I go, I'm not friggin' spitting. And he goes, Matt, do it this way. So he was showing me like, just like different type of, mouth techniques that will allow a lot more airflow through the horn versus kind of being taught originally from Mr. Tree in the beginning of, just vibrating your lips. So of course I started, practicing that, and I ended up hearing a difference, not only in clarity, but also in tone. So one day, of course, we're packing up, and this is like weeks and weeks and weeks. He comes over and goes, Matt, come here. Yeah, sure, what's up? And he goes, I'm going to stop calling you Spitz. And I go, well, it's about damn time. But he was Mr. Smith. He was he was a character, and God rest his soul. He was another inspiration, and it's great. But we're going down memory lane again. Marcus, let's talk about these gigs, man. What's one gig that is most memorable since picking up the sax? What's one gig that you could say, moving forward, obviously this is the after years now, that you really enjoyed, and what's the story behind it?
That it's so hard. It's so hard to pick a particular one right now. But there's been so many good ones. Playing with the Worcester crew, some of the people in Worcester at this outside bar called MCL, Marine Corps League, playing outside on the stage. You got boats in the water, tons of people there. Right in the summertime, those are some fun ones. Michael's Cigar Bar in Worcester, that's a pretty cool venue to play. Nighttime, good sound, good lighting, just all around great time. Greendale's Pub in Worcester, a lot of bands play there.
Yeah.
And there's always a great crowd there. And then also the other places, Vincent's. If you haven't been to Vincent's in Worcester, it's an awesome place. They've got a great crowd, great different variety of music, different bands, and it's always a fun time playing there. There'd actually be some Wednesday nights where I'd play there and not leave till 1:30 and have to work the next day, and it'd be a rough morning. But there's so many cool places I've played in Worcester, down in Rhode Island, and even out in like Somerville, Cambridge area. I've done some fill-in gigs out there with soul bands, and there's been some jam funk bands out there that I've sat in with, and I can remember, I think before this all happened, a band I like called Kong Thunderfunk was playing down there. And
that's a great name.
That is an awesome.
Yeah, it's an awesome name. Awesome name. I remember, I think there were 3 trumpets, a trombone.
Marcus, what was the name? What was the name again?
It was Kong Thunderfunk.
I just wanted to hear it again. Kong Thunderfunk.
Oh man. Yeah, but when you get a whole bunch of people together and it's just, off the head, everyone's jamming, grooving, and, just having an overall great time. For me, that's when the music is, superb, and that's when the crowd really loves it, and everyone is engaged.
Perfect. I know that you were mentioning that, Worcester was one of the first cities that you mentioned playing. I played in multiple types of venues in Worcester. like Ralph's Diner, has not only to have good food, but a great sound. They have a great sound system as well as a great stage. What are some venues that you liked playing at? Are there any repetitive venues that you play at?
I'd say Vincent's for a while, and also Vincent's and Nick's. Vincent's and Nick's, they have the same owner, but if you're not familiar with Nick's, it's on Millbury Street. It's like a small cabaret-looking place. They've also got a pretty good mix of music there, and it's just a really cool place.
So who's the owner, Nick or Vincent?
Vincent, actually, yeah. Vincent. He also owns Ralph's Diner on, I think it's Grove Street.
Yep.
Grove Street. Yep.
Have you had the chance to play? It was formerly known. Unfortunately, it's that's also another rest in peace place, another great venue that closed down. But did you ever get a chance to play with bands at the Lucky Dog? Then they changed their name to the Cove.
Yep.
Oh,
I have played there, and played there with the Sublime tribute band that I'm in, Secondhand Smoke. We've played there multiple times. I might have played there with different bands also. And we actually still play at, I forgot the name of the place, but it's in Douglas. I think it's in Douglas. But it's the guy who used to own the Cove. He still owns the place. It's Drafters and Dudley. That's what it is.
Okay.
Same owner, but he still has a bunch of music down there, so it's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, and so for a hobby, you've mentioned that you perform, multiple gigs in a day, possibly. How many gigs in a year are you doing with this being a hobby? Because it's been a couple years now, and in that realm.
I think the most I've done was probably last year, and I think I did probably about 120 gigs.
That's one heck of a hobby.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's 52 weeks in a year.
Yeah.
Like 3 in a weekend or something.
Oh yeah, almost every single weekend, I'm playing usually once or twice a week, and sometimes three times. But.
Well, and with all those bands, how do you balance all the practices on top of your gigs?
There were a lot of bands where they wouldn't have practices, or we'd practice every now and then, and we would just go out and play, or we'd learn the song. We'd get a list, learn the songs at home, and then just go out and play them.
That's scary.
Yeah, it was kind of scary. It's kind of scary, but it usually ended up working out pretty well. And a lot of the Worcester crew, it was kind of like that. A lot of the same musicians, and most people had a general knowledge of most of the songs because they played here at one point or there at another point. And so we just got together and played, and it just worked out.
How often do you improvise when you play out?
Me, all the time, every single time.
So what is it? You just need to know what the key of the piece is in, and then you just take off from there.
And I mean, obviously, there's certain songs where like some of those old R&B and soul songs where they have the horn lines and hits. Sometimes I'll try to write some little notes down, or I'll just practice it and try to remember it and listen to it while I'm driving and just remember them, and then just play them when I'm at the gig.
It's amazing. And speaking of tunes. What would you say is probably your favorite tune to play? I mean, what's the first song that comes to your head that you enjoy playing?
That's a tough one. Oh, that's a tough one. I can't even really answer that because there's so many.
It could be more difficult. It could be like, pick one song from the 4 bands you play with.
Don't worry, some of them overlap.
No pressure.
I like playing, I know it sounds kind of cliche or whatever, but Superstition.
Oh.
Wonder Superstition, we play that.
Superstition.
Yep. And then one that I sing Bill Withers' Use Me. And that's
Use Me. Oh, that's amazing.
Yep.
Who needs to dub in the song? Matt's just singing it.
Well, what's funny is that for a while, I want to say this is probably like college years, but I played in a funk band with my dad, and we were called oh god, it's like a friggin' tongue twister, syncopatic funk, and actually, Kayla, later on down the road, we ended up playing with your neighbor, who was our front man,
Daryl.
Yeah. And Bill.
Got a killer voice though.
Daryl's an amazing vocalist.
Good.
Another guy who's playing in like 3 bands right now.
It's phenomenal. And the best times was, eventually that band broke up, and then Ted, my dad, joined a band with your dad, and Daryl was our front man. And then I switched over to the trombone. So that was the time that, of course, I'm saying 3 years ago, I was like, oh, let's try to pick this up again. But before that, I went out and I bought a trombone to be like, hey, let's kind of get this thing back up. And I ended up playing horns for, Ted's dad and my dad's band. And Bill Withers, Use Me is the song that we played. So that's so funny that you mentioned, Use Me. And that's awesome that you it. It's such an amazing song.
I love it.
And another tie into that. So Matt, later on down the road, your dad and I were in a band together, also with Daryl, and we also played Use Me.
Wow.
So it all comes full circle here on Distorted Opinions.
Clearly, Bill Withers was used.
And for those that are listening to this, there were multiple face palms.
Yes. Face palms, eye rolls, sighing, you name it.
It could be worse. I could pull a dad joke, but
oh my goodness.
That's awesome, Marcus. That's amazing to hear. And I have to say, what would you say is your next move in your music career? Where do you see yourself? Let's say the next 10 years playing.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? This is an interview.
Where do you see yourself tomorrow?
We told him we weren't going to interrogate him, and here we are asking him job interview questions. My God.
Well, I think within the next 5 years, I just want to keep on growing and having different opportunities playing with different people, because every different band or every different individual has something different to bring to the table. And personally, I'd like to do more jazz, more funk, groove-oriented music. I want to get into, actually recording some things. I just recently bought an interface to, hook up to my computer, and I've got to learn the software and, try to find backing tracks and actually record some things. So that's another thing that I want to do. And then other than that, one thing that I'd really love to do is learn how to play bass. I would love to play bass, play some mean funk.
As I look over at mine, it's like right off screen here. No, definitely pick up the bass, man. That's that's really cool. And I think even for some of the quarantine life we've been living for the past couple of months, I've been picking up my guitar more than ever. And bass both, and on the hunt for a cello to just learn a new instrument, because why not? Right. All of a sudden you put it off, and I've been talking about cello for 5 years. I still haven't done it, but I've decided now this is the time, and I'll try to get one. But I should totally grab the bass. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, and again, going back to our previous conversation, much like a guitar, bass, I mean, you've got the added advantage that you do know how to read music, but with bass, you don't have to know how to read music on a bass either, because there are tabs. So it makes it a little bit easier to dive into that instrument. So yeah, absolutely go for it.
And speaking of you're wanting to record, all the musicians here, if you need collaboration, I mean, we can.
Yep.
We got a lot of instruments to assist with. If you need some assistance or decide, hey, like this type of sound, we keep us in mind.
And dude, so we've talked a lot in our previous shows about our musical influences, and we do our song of the week, which we're going to get to in a second. But and we all pick typically rock metal songs as our song of the week, and I think that's where a lot of our influences are. But I would love to improve my jazz guitar skills. I have a huge amount of respect for jazz guitarists. It is, for some reason, jazz guitar is not something that comes easily to me. I've tried to play it. I just can't really nail the sound. My solos always end up sounding more bluesy than jazz. And so I certainly would be open to the challenge of having to come up with some jazzier sounding guitar stuff. So yeah, again, if you need any accompaniments for anything that you're trying to do, I'd love to try my hand at jazz guitar. But you know, and
jazz drumming is also a different style in itself.
It is.
It's very unique, and the timing's so different, and it's not a style that I practice, and definitely, having that in your tool belt, if you will, just makes you more versatile for anything you wind up playing, just because
Right.
it is such a unique sound, and takes a lot of practice to be really good at it. So definitely give respect to jazz drummers too.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Marcus, obviously, you're a not only a great professional musician, but also a great friend. And should you need any assistance, from any of us when it comes down to collaboration, or just laying tracks down for whatever music that you guys write. I personally have an interface myself, and I produce and record too. So if you have raw tracks, if you like them just like somewhere, like just mastered, mixed and mastered, more than happen to take this conversation offline, and we could talk. The theme song to Distorted Opinions is actually from all three of us. So, Ted came up with with kind of like the concept of the idea. Kayla did the recording, and I did the mixing and the mastering. Mm-hmm. So it just goes to show that,
awesome. We created that in, I think, basically a week, the three of us.
Yeah, literally a week and whatnot. But obviously, like I said, not only are you a special guest, but you're also like one of our special friends type of thing. So, anything that you guys need, obviously would love to collaborate and whatnot. But Kayla, I know that you mentioned that we're probably coming up on the song of the week. So should we jump right into it?
We should. Yeah, we're actually, this show is going to be another long one, but that's okay.
Fine.
He's worth it.
No, honestly, I've been thinking as we've gone through this that this probably could easily have been a 3-part show. So we'll probably have to have Marcus back on at some point, particularly when you get to a point where you're able to start, hopefully in the not too distant future, doing some of your regular, normal type gigs where you can actually play at venues in front of an audience. And we didn't even touch on, I know you had mentioned that you've been performing with the Tony Soul Project, and they've been streaming those on Facebook Live, but you're playing at different venues when you do that, correct?
Yes, usually outdoors, certain people's homes, whether it be in a barn or like a music studio or just in the driveway,
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear from you when, hopefully not too far down the road, when you're able to start playing gigs at maybe some of the places you mentioned during the show, about, how that's going, and whether or not you're back with some of the bands you've been playing with. But we are running out of time, so we're gonna dive into the song of the week. Do you guys want me to go first, since I'm already got the mic, so to speak?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this week I went a little bit off the beaten path from some of the other song choices that I've picked, and I've gone with a song called Run, which is the title track off of the 2020 album Run by Joji. And I've heard this song a lot on SiriusXM's Alt Nation. It's got some great blues guitar, blues rock guitar. It's very simple, but it's catchy. And as I was doing a little bit of research on it to be able to talk about it on the show, I discovered, and I had no idea, that the performer is actually a Japanese singer-songwriter. And it's an amazing track. Like I said, it's got some great blues rock guitar. I'm a big fan of blues and rock. So I'd recommend checking it out for sure. And we'll, I think, go next to, in my view on here, we'll go kind of counterclockwise. We'll hit Matt and then Ted, and then we can give Marcus some time in case he needs to pick a tune. Although we did put him on the spot a lot with picking his favorite tunes from gigs and stuff. So
what we will try to do in the beginning for future episodes is obviously when we get special guests that we'll give them a heads up that, hey, pick a song of the week. So that way they could, solemnly guess they could open up the floor with the song of the week. But that's awesome, Kayla. That's awesome. I'll have to check that out. You said 2020, so it just came out?
It did. Yeah. It just came out a few months ago. So it's been getting a lot of play on, I don't listen to a lot of commercial radio these days. I have a Sirius subscription, so I listen to a lot of Sirius, and I've been finding myself listening to a lot of the Alt Nation channel and the Sirius XM Real Jazz, which Marcus, I know you probably love that station on Fridays. Marcus Miller takes over, and he does a lot of kind of funk jazz, which is really cool stuff. But yeah, so Run is getting a lot of play right now on Alt Nation, so that's where I initially heard it.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to, today's episode is obviously, not only is it, special for me personally, but also our first guest. So kind of want to still stick with our, the theme. And I mentioned it earlier in our, I believe it was probably the first segment, or actually may have been this segment, but I'm going to have to go with Glenn Miller's In the Mood. Big band jazz, came out, released 1939. Was actually featured in the movie. What's right here? My notes. Sun Valley Serenade. I mean, there's so much to say about this song. I mean, one, it's uplifting. Two, it's full of sound, full of just, again, it's the big band era. And whenever I think about this song, I think about the group that we played back then, and just, hearing In the Mood gets me in the mood. So it's, but I just wanted to keep it simple. Again, Glenn Miller's In the Mood, 1939. It's just a great song. And, for all of us, as well as, our former musicians that we shared the stage with, and entertained the audience with, is just it was always one of those songs that got people out of their seats to even go dance. Actually, I think there was even a jazz gig where we played at a hotel, and
we played at the senior center.
In Pepperell, I think.
Yes.
Rotten.
Yeah. Was it?
And
Rotten?
I believe that there were some people dance to that. So again, it's just a very uplifting type of tune, and that's kind of my song of the week. In the Mood.
Awesome.
So
all right. Choice. Well, I continue down the rock path as I do every week. But for this one, we've talked about gigs and performing quite a bit. This song was the first song, actually, not the very first, but first pep rally we were performed at. We played this song, Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit. It's a classic. I remember learning the guitar solo for that, and then in the moment of actually performing it, I was so nervous that my hands were shaking so bad that it didn't happen. It was just awful. But that song in particular, was a great. It's so catchy. It's classic. But definitely one from our first gig, Matt and I, in our high school garage band days. So that's my pick.
Awesome.
All
right, Marcus, hopefully you've had some time to come up with a pick. What's your pick for the song of the week?
So a song that I like that I was just thinking about, was talking about, you mentioned Marcus Miller and his show on Field Jazz, and then also me wanting to play bass, wanting to learn how to play bass, and one of the songs that I like that he does is "Run for Coverage." I think David Sanborn actually wrote it, so obviously the saxophone on there too. But it's just a cool song, and the bass hook's really catchy, and it's just got a really cool sound to it. And obviously I love Marcus Miller's playing, I love David Sanborn's playing, and it's just it's a pretty cool song. So that's my pick for Song of the Week.
Awesome. Some great picks, guys.
Well, Marcus, it's pleasure to have you, take time to come join us on the show, being our very first guest, and, just like what Kayla said, later on down the road, hopefully when this whole, this COVID thing lifts up, that we'll start seeing some gigs happen. Obviously we'd love to go, see you live. Hint, maybe we might even do a Distorted Opinions live segment. But would love to see you in action, man. And, again, I'm so glad that things are going great for you. Glad to hear that, that sax is still hot. And, wish nothing but the best, man. Again, you're not only a great musician, but a great friend to all of us.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Really appreciate your time and hanging out with us today.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. We look forward to having you on again. And with that, that's all the time we have for this show. But again, as always, if you've got an idea for a future topic, or if you want to be considered as a guest, feel free to send us an email at distortedopinionsshow@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook for extras and updates on future shows. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Marcus. We hope to see you again soon, and good luck with all of your gigs.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.